And good evening and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission. Rally our realm and set as we see it, and always frankly as well. I'm Joe Spina along with Paul Crowley.
Joe, you know, I mean, someday I'm going to have to say that opening, and I'm not sure I'll ever get it right, but you just do it with such great flair every week.
Well, you know, olive oil. They tell me that olive oil is
A good lubricant?
for your memory. Would you believe that?
Is that right?
Yeah, it's like a anti-Alzheimer cure. Salt, all kinds of stuff going. You know, salt used to be bad for you, now it's good for you. But here's what's good.
What's that?
Well, Lynn TV, LCTV, is that right? LCTV has a website. They launched it, and apparently, all the election folks, if you want to know what's going to be happening in election selection on their website, and they're going to have videos and biogs and more from the candidates or for the candidates running for school committee, city council, and mayor. So they go to, what is that website, Paul? It's
lyntv.org/elections.
Yeah.
And the bios and videos are already up there, and it's a good opportunity to learn a little bit about the candidates. And you know, and also as a reminder that next Tuesday, September 12th, is primary election day. So make sure you get out to vote. One other thing I want to point out is
go ahead.
it doesn't happen very often, but this actually means something for Ward 2 because there are 4 candidates and only 2 will make it to the finals, right?
Yeah, but what bothers me about this, Paul, very seriously, and folks, think about this. It's pretty sad that we don't have more folks running for office.
That should happen in it should be every ward, it should be at large, it should be the mayor, and it should be the school committee, where there are a big field that gets whittled down to 2 for every open seat. For example, for council at large, it's going to be 8. There would be 8 people on the ballot, max.
Right.
So nobody's going to be cut. Max.
But nobody's going to be cut September. There's no reason for anybody to go out in real terms, except for jockeying for position.
Right. And as somebody who benefited from the primary when it didn't matter otherwise, I mean, I needed to have a showing in the primary. I actually came in 4th in the primary, and it gave me a good jump start. It was essentially a poll, right?
Yes, that's right.
So it was helpful to me as a candidate, new candidate.
But the people who vote in the primary are those who are politically acute, astute or acute, whichever way you want to say it. So you don't get a general feel. I was very good at primaries, by the way. I always won primaries. The finals I had a problem with.
Right.
I was a really terrific front runner. But I was also a Republican. In the city of Lynn, that's not a good thing to be.
Right.
And we'll get into that in a sec. But anyways.
You said you were a Republican.
Yeah.
Are you no longer?
No, I'm a Republican. But I'm not.
Because you keep talking about changing, going to unenrolled.
No, I would. Let me say this. Depending on how you define parties today.
There's not a dime's worth of difference, remember?
That's true. Judge Wallace.
Yeah.
Well, that's what troubles me. I don't know, where do you go? Where do you go if you believe in small government? Where do you go where you believe in law and order? I mean, they're going bonkers now over the fact that Donald Trump's Attorney General turned around and said that they're going to end a constitutionally illegal executive order on DACA, right?
Right.
All right. So
and putting the pressure on Congress to either, if they want to protect the Dreamers, then they should pass legislation. It should not be done by fiat. And that's really all he's doing.
You're absolutely right, Paul. But he's not putting the pressure on Congress. He's asking them to do their job.
Right.
I mean, Congress is where you pass laws.
Right.
Not
the executive enforces them. So all Trump is saying is we're going to enforce the law.
That's it.
That's it.
And he says, I'm going to give you a 6-month window for you to faction something that we can work with.
Right. And by the way, since you guys make the laws, whatever you want to do, I will enforce, is what he's saying.
Exactly. And the courts should not be in the business of legislating, which is what happened. Now, to Frankly Joe. Are you ready, Paul?
I am ready.
Let's get that Frankly Joe up there, Pedro. And welcome back, Pedro. Pedro Diaz just returned from vacation. He went to New York, visited Mom, and he looks great. And therefore, we're going to have a pretty decent show. He's in great shape. Promises, promises, promises. That's all you hear during the election year, Paul. And that worn-out cliches, right? I'll fight for you, they say. Together we can. Better still, moving forward, which is infinitely better than moving backwards. A smorgasbord of politically correct jargon designed not to offend anybody, Paul, and in effect they offend everybody. Predictably, the promises are promptly broken, and regretfully, the cliches persist, only to be recycled over and over and over again ad nauseum. Now, wouldn't it be refreshing if those running for office simply recognize that Lynn cannot sustain the influx of migrant children into the city's schools? It's breaking the bank. Slogans like fighting for us, moving forward, working together, avoid facing the test of leadership. Taking action, such as saying no to sanctuary cities, stemming the flood of illegal immigrants, and balancing the budget demonstrates leadership. And at that point, deserves a vote.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's a very, very well said, frankly, Joe. And you know, I'm going to go to here. There's a couple things I wanted to speak to, and that is, you know, predictably, the promises are promptly broken. And look what's happening. You know, and you know, you folks at home, you probably hear this talk all the time. So, when Barack Obama first won, and
hope and change.
So Democrats had the presidency. They also had the Senate and the House of Representatives, right?
In veto
proof.
And veto proof, because the margins were huge.
Right.
Yeah.
So they controlled everything. So when he started passing the laws that were, you know, progressive type laws, left leaning and so forth, you had a revolt. And in the first midterm election, the Republicans got the House of Representatives back, right? In 12, Obama wins again, and then the midterms in 14, the Republicans got the Senate back, right? And when they had the House and they couldn't do anything, they said, if you give us the Senate, we'll do things. We got the Senate, and they said, we can't do anything unless we have the presidency. Get us the presidency, we'll do these things. All along the way, they kept pushing the goalposts down the court. And what happened? We've got House of Representatives. The Republicans have the House of Representatives, they have the Senate, and they have the presidency. And now they won't do they won't stand by all of the things that they promised to do.
But who is standing by his promises?
Trump.
Yeah. And his own party, Paul Ryan, who, by the way, was out there, and McConnell, making promises. They're the ones that are breaking the promises.
Right.
So when
But because they do it in a polite way, it's supposed to be okay. Right? They lie politely, and that's better than being, you know, right out in front, non-diplomatic, and jamming it down people's throats that I'm going to do it the honest way. I like that way better. I mean, I would wish he was a little bit more political about it.
Look,
you know,
well, you
careful.
asked at the beginning of the show, at the top of the show, about am I still a Republican? In the sense of the Freedom Caucus, yes. That group that are fighting the establishment, the Romney types, the Bushes. I'm not that.
Right.
I'm Rand Paul, Cruz.
More of a libertarian.
Much more so.
Yeah, I would say that.
Now, frankly, Paul, you know, you're going to give us a little history lesson here, I understand.
Yes.
And there's a graphic up there I want to comment about afterwards, because people say a lot of stuff there, and they're really not adept, particularly what they call the alt-left. Do you ever hear the alt-left? Yeah, we're going to get into here the alt-right.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so frankly, Paul, okay, thank you, Pedro. Cincinnatus, retired and old, was called by his fellow citizens to thwart an invasion. He was given complete control over the state. A swift victory was achieved, after which Cincinnatus relinquished his power and returned to his farm. Subsequently, Cincinnatus has come to exemplify outstanding leadership, service for the greater good, civic virtue, lack of personal ambition, and modesty. That was in Rome back in 458 BC, and he was, prior to that, he was the ruler of all of Rome, right?
He was a general, and he was a consul. You know, it was a republic then. There was no dictatorship.
Right.
But in the Roman Republic, they made room for dictatorship when and if there was a problem.
Right.
If there was a plague or threat, they'd say, Paul Crowley,
Right.
you're going to go out there, we're going to give you power, unlimited power,
Fix
for a
it.
year, fix the problem,
But
and then that's it.
But they could trust him to walk away when he was done. Right.
He did it.
Right. Now, and today, we're that's really not the case. I mean, let me just replay this one. Subsequently, has come to exemplify outstanding leadership, service for the greater good, civic virtue, lack of personal ambition, and modesty. I ask you, think about the young politician, right? The guy who starts his first job after he graduates from college is to go work as an aide to a state rep, then run for city council, then run for state rep. Pretty soon he'll run for Senate. His career is he wants to be a politician for his career.
That's right.
Right?
Is that public service?
That's not public service.
What is it?
That's blind ambition, if you ask me.
Well, here's the whole point. If you take a look at what Cincinnati did and what they call civic virtue, which is what we're sadly lacking.
Right.
Rule of law, respect for the rule of law, which is sadly misunderstood and misrepresented. So if we look at 217, don't forget, our country, the United States of America, our founding fathers, aped the Roman Republic.
Right. And by the way, and another really good example is George Washington, right? So George Washington was the general who led us to victory in the Revolutionary War.
Right.
And because of his duty and service to country, he was hands down the guy they wanted to be the president.
Could have been king.
Could have been king.
Refused.
Right? He refused king.
And what did he do after 2 terms?
After 2 terms, by the way, there was no law that said that
No,
2
he could have
terms.
kept running on it forever.
Right. He said, it's time for somebody else to take over. I'm going back to my farm.
You know who violated that, by the way? That became a tradition.
The Democrats.
FDR.
Right. That was shortly after he had Huey Long assassinated, right?
Huey Long was assassinated in 35 before he got rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
Huey Long was going to run against
it's
him.
probably not fair to indict him for actually pulling the trigger, but his ilk wanted to make sure that that guy did not have any influence over the outcome of the election, so they got rid of him.
Well, he was hooked up. Huey Long was hooked up with Father Coughlin, who was a great radio. They call them demagogues.
The voice, yeah.
But demagogues call others demagogues when they are demagoguing themselves.
Right, yeah.
I mean, for example,
Barack Obama was a demagogue.
Of course he was.
And so was Adolf Hitler.
Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that they were the same,
right.
But
they were demagogues. That's all.
Demagogues,
and that means that they speak in a way that the oration has the ability to really get you focused on them.
Do you remember the temple in Colorado when Barack Obama was almost messianic?
That was right after he won, right?
Yeah. I mean, talk about demagoguery.
Right.
I mean, that was it on steroids, right?
Right.
So the point is that if you take a look, and you know that we're a republic, we're not a democracy.
Right.
Okay. And they factored in, and maybe we should think about it, that if things go bad, you put someone in charge for a year to straighten everything
But by
out.
the way, back to that point, and I didn't finish reading, frankly, Paul, and I'll do that real quickly. So today, service for the greater good is lucrative, civic virtue.
Slow down a bit. Do you think leadership has been redefined? What it is to be a leader?
Yeah, I don't think people understand what it is. I don't think it's been redefined.
Did Cincinnati understand what leadership was?
Yes.
Exactly.
He had with great personal sacrifice, stepped in to do what had to be done.
Exactly.
And making hard decisions is something that a good leader does.
And what happened when he did it?
He probably took a lot of grief.
He went back to the farm, Paul.
No, but I'm just saying he took a lot of grief doing it because they were not necessarily popular things, but the things that needed to be done.
Exactly.
For example, fixing the Social Security system and Medicare and fixing these things has to be done, even though anybody who tries to fix it is run out of town on a rail because.
Right. But was he concerned about re-election?
No.
Right. So when you have somebody that's entrusted to do what's necessary and not worried about re-election, you get the right things happening.
Well, if you just look at the 2 terms of Barack Obama, I mean, he got everything done. He took all the controversial stuff, got it done very early, and then spent the next 2 years just
Learning how to play golf.
and campaigning and maneuvering so that he'd be in the best position to win. And by the way, by hiding key facts like what happened in Benghazi so that he could get reelected. But no,
All right,
I digress.
let's go down about today.
So civic virtue has been replaced by partisanship. Personal ambition is on steroids. And modesty, well, it's simply a quaint, outdated Victorian nicety. Searching for Cincinnatus. Is anybody?
Not only that, today's service for the greater good has become lucrative. It's an enterprise.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, and I'm not going to get into names or anything like that, but I mean, how many times have you heard of somebody who has been, at the State House, has advanced up in the leadership, and then right when you think they're going to be the next speaker or the next senator, all of a sudden they step down, and a year later they're making $500,000 as working for a lobbying firm in Boston.
No, they're not that good if they're only making $500,000, Paul.
Or whatever, some crazy number. But that's the ambition that's driving their decision making.
This is what we have to reveal and talk about.
Right.
Because unfortunately, if we allow the situation to look, when Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton left Arkansas, they never owned a home, They never owned a home in all of their years until they finally got beat. Don't forget, they lived in the mansion in Arkansas as governor. They lived in the White House. And it was only afterwards that they ended up being able to buy a house. And she proclaimed that they were dead broke when they left. And she's sitting on a couple of $100 million as we speak.
Right.
Now, is that well earned?
No.
Of course. I mean, the Barack Obama and his wife. I mean, they came from humble beginnings, right?
Yep.
They're sitting on a lot of change right now. So they've been bitten on the neck, Paul.
Yep.
They can't identify from where they came from. As opposed to folks like Chubby Fallon, you folks, maybe I'm dating you. Chubby spent about $37 on bumper stickers once, and that was it.
What was this expression? These hands are clean.
Exactly. And there was a fellow from senator from Wisconsin, I believe he was from Wisconsin. His name was Proxmire, Senator Proxmire. He never spent any money either.
Got elected every time.
Every time. And so something can be said about that. So when you see all those signs...
You know what's interesting?
Yeah.
Mayor Kennedy never spends any money either.
No, she doesn't. And she gets elected, everybody underestimates her. Oh, by the way, let's get this up there. Let the games begin, Paul.
Yes, now we can talk about the local Lynn politics.
Let those games begin. Now, let's begin with this. Way back, a couple of years back, wasn't it, Paul?
Yeah.
That we were really up against it because, as you pointed out, since you know how to add and subtract, being an accountant, I love people to remind people that you're a bean counter.
Yeah.
Okay? Our budget was being negatively impacted by an influx of unaccompanied minors now. That means they were fundamentally illegal into our school system. We have to take them into our school system, which was negatively impacting
between
our budget.
Between 350 and 400 kids a year, which is like a half a school.
Yeah, and that was about $5 million per year added expense to and that's cumulative because each year it's 5, and then it becomes 10, then it becomes 15, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's permanent. So Judy went national.
Yeah, I remember that. Remember we went to Boston?
Right.
We stood up on the State House steps, and and Judy was there speaking to a massive crowd with Jeff Cooner.
With Jeff Cooner.
Yeah.
And she was called on the Stuart Varney show.
Yeah.
And then she went to Judge Judy, and I don't know if we got that up there. And all I had to do is, how did we save our schools? How do we save the budget in the city of Lynn? And she went there specifically in Washington, D.C. to try to get some help. If you're going to send these kids to us, how about sending the dollars to offset the cost that we're going to have to pick up through policies that you folks created?
Right.
We're the victims in a sense of bad policy, right?
Right.
And that's and the proof of the pudding is that as we're sitting here right now, Paul, the city of Lynn has a ratio of almost double that of any other community, and the amount of children versus population that go to our school systems.
Right.
Way out of whack, right?
And that's almost to a person because of either unaccompanied minors, illegal immigration, or
Refugees.
refugees. Right.
Right. And
We get them all.
exactly. In 1950, folks, 1950, the United Nations Council on Refugee Allocation, or whatever you want to call it, they designated the city of Lynn as a refugee city. The United Nations now. Our State Department was complicit and said,
Right.
okay. And not only that, I'll tell you what we're going to do.
Did we
Say
get
that-
like an award or something? So like a key to
Yeah. You get the key to the city. So for the last 70 almost years, we've been designated as a refugee city, and our State Department actually hires contractors to place displaced people into the city of Lynn.
Right.
Now, Paul, they're good people.
Yeah. No.
As a
and-
school teacher, I got a whole bunch of Russian kids that were brought over. They actually were Russian Jews that were being discriminated against.
Right.
And because you've dealt with the Russian community in the city of Lynn, and that's we do good work at it.
Right, and I think it's important for people at home to understand that neither one of us is saying that we don't want these people to come. What we're saying is either distribute the burden of caring for them more broadly, or provide us with the funding to do it appropriately.
Well, isn't that realistic, Paul?
Yeah, that's all.
All right. So I mean, when last week when we talked about voodoo mathematics, when my dear friend Demento was trying to say that Lynn spends $3,000 per pupil, when we spend $13,600, which is really a modest figure compared to, and kudos to the mayor and to the superintendent for
Making it work, right?
For making it work, right? Because he wants to say that it's all discounted because of state aid. Well, it is true that federal dollars and state dollars do follow certain students into the city of Lynn for the reason that we do a great job with them, right? Well, similarly, shouldn't dollars follow when we have an overcapacity of a particular subgroup?
How about when we're missing the capacity? We need 2 more schools in order to meet.
Well, a new school, Paul, has to be manned. So it's not just the building of the school.
No, right.
That's another 80, 90 personnel at $10 million a year on top of everything
But
else.
what Demento is saying to you, and I agree in part to what he's saying, and that is that we do get state aid eventually to pay for each new kid that comes into the school system. But they don't. But that aid does not pay for the building that we put the kids in.
That's right. It doesn't pay for the personnel either.
And then the state will admonish us or penalize us if we don't have enough capacity to put the kids in.
As they have.
Right.
As they have.
And if we check the box wrong in 1991, they will penalize us further by, this not having the proper
That was
net.
about $900,000, and they,
No,
and they won
$8 million.
over time.
Yeah,
But it was per year.
Right.
Right.
But basically what they're saying is you have not been spending enough money, therefore you need
Now,
to.
was any of that have to do with the mayor's tenure?
No, it all happened long before even Pat McManus,
So,
or maybe under Pat McManus.
no, regardless, we have state representatives that are supposed to have their ears to the ground and pick up on stuff like that and
come to our defense when needed, right?
Yeah, but that didn't happen, Paul.
No, it didn't.
It didn't happen either at the state or the.
And I wonder why. I mean, so if the city's so let's just think about this pragmatically.
Right.
The city's financially in tough shape. The mayor needs the state to give them some relief, right? Give the city some relief so that they can work through the problem. They did get some relief, but really not. I mean, they didn't get out of that paying it. They got a time to pay it, right? Mm-hmm. So they didn't say you don't have to pay it, but they did say you can pay it over time. So the question is, could the state delegation have done more? And I don't know whether they could have or not, but if they had done more, would that have improved the financial condition of the city? And I think it would have. So then the question is, why didn't they do more?
That's right.
And then it becomes, and this is the thing that drives me the craziest about politics, is, this gets back to my whole thing about who was the president after Kennedy? Who was the vice president for Kennedy?
After Lyndon Johnson?
Lyndon Johnson. When he was the head of the Senate in the 50s,
Right.
he wouldn't do, he wanted to.
Oh, yeah, he wouldn't do anything to make someone else look good.
Right. So that's what's going on here. So the delegation, Democrats, mayor, Republican, they can't do anything that the mayor is going to look good at. So they essentially allow the city to suffer financially for it. So you could make the argument that it isn't that the only thing the mayor ever did wrong here was be a Republican.
And that is exactly the point about lack of leadership, and civic duty has been now partisanized.
Right.
So it's not in what's in the best interest of the country or the city, it's the best interest of the party. And that's where we're falling down. Now, let me go one step further.
Can I just go?
Sure.
I want to point out that the best interest of the party is something that drives me crazy, and it's part of the reason why I'm not. I got knocked out of the city council. Is in my first term, is when decisions were coming up, there were people in the organized minority were coming to me and telling me what they thought were which way to go on certain issues. And I said, thank you for your input, and I did whatever I did, right? And after a while, it was becoming pretty clear to me that I wasn't doing what they were telling me, so they were pulling their support of me. It was amazing.
Oh, wow, Mr. Paul, you refuse to be a puppet.
I refused to be a puppet. And that's, so, while I was, to your way of thinking, providing good leadership, I was antagonizing that organized minority, and they got rid of me for that.
That is the issue, folks. And this is why I like what LCTV is doing. They're putting up videos so you can see the way they speak, the way they act, because there's a lot of information you can pick up by watching the way a person moves. They call it body language.
Yep.
All right. I don't know why people vote for signs. The signs say nothing. Just a whole bunch of signs up there, and they have a person's name on it, and that's it.
There's kind of a mindset that basically says the more signs you have out there, the more support you have. It's just it's all a facade, in my view.
Yeah. Could be.
Yeah.
We got to give the senator his due,
Tom McGee,
and we can put that up there. So Senator McGee, who has decided to challenge the mayor. He served in the state senate since 2002, so he's been there for 15 years, and
in
he's
the
the co-chair of the Legislative Transportation
and
Committee.
he was in the House of Representatives for I think another 7
before that.
or 8 years, yeah.
Before that.
Yeah.
He also recently served as a 3-year term as Democratic State Committee Chairman, which is significant because that's a very partisan position.
Right. His job was to kick the crap out of the governor all the time.
That's exactly. Did you know I happen to, and
Yep.
both of us know someone very close to the governor and the lieutenant governor,
Yep.
who told me categorically that Tom McGee got marching orders from Washington, D.C. to kick the crap out of Baker because they could not have him as the most popular governor in the country, which he is, as a Republican.
In spite of all of their efforts.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's that. So he's also associated with MassDOT. Is that correct?
He's not associated with MassDOT, but in his role as co-chairman of the Legislature's Transportation Committee, he oversees all things transportation.
And the ferry. The ferry was one of his big
That's
issues,
part
right?
of, yeah, that's actually, so
That's his baby?
So he was on the Transportation Committee, so that's a statewide responsibility. And in a local capacity, he really pushed hard for the ferry. That was his baby right from the very beginning.
Which, in effect, was a lost leader.
It was.
Okay.
If we have a ferry system that's operating and successfly bringing people into the city and creating an access to Boston for Lynn residents as well, and it's a functioning and vibrant thing, then we can say it's a success. It's not quite there yet. I give them a lot of credit for staying with it, but I think to your point is, it's pretty difficult when it's heavily subsidized, and where do you get the money to keep paying for it?
Well, that's the problem.
Right.
That's the problem when government tries to push in programs and do things that cost money, as opposed to returning a benefit. I mean, It's like taking money, taking a match and lighting lining up $10 and $20 bills.
Right.
That's crazy. Election 217. As it turns out, Ward 2 has the sole distinction of having the only contested race that matters come next week, Paul.
Yep.
And that's because both the mayor and her challenger there's no other challenger. Just those two, they automatically make the final. So it's kind of a beauty contest for them, right? They both sail to the finals. That's it. All 8 at-large slots are filled by exactly 8 candidates, so they all make it, which I think is not very healthy. I think we should have 12, 13, 14, 15, and let everybody fall where they may. So no one's going to be eliminated at-large. School committee, they didn't even fill their
they didn't even get to 12, right?
They didn't get to 12. They got to 10. There are 10 candidates, and yet there could have been 12 nominated. Wards 4, 6, and 7, I mean, they're running against air. Right. They're reelected doing nothing. You know what's interesting? We mentioned this before. Former Mayor Clancy, the only time he ever ran against somebody, he lost. He's never won running against a real person as mayor.
He lost to Marino, and then he lost to Kennedy, right?
Yeah, and he became mayor by acclamation, basically, on a corrupt bargain, so to speak, right? And ran unopposed. Am I right?
He definitely ran unopposed in 2000 and 2004.
And he received the mayor's seat. It was handed to him by McManus.
Right, because McManus at the last
with no one who
withdrew.
ran. Right, so they pretty much by acclamation. So we got to get away from that. That's my point.
Yeah.
All right. So.
Although I thought Chip did a great job.
What was that?
Chip did a great job. He did a lot of. He was a.
That's not the issue. The issue is his process. I'm not going to.
No, but I mean, he didn't violate any process.
No, I understand
the process was what it was.
But is a system that's built on that predicate needs that.
Right.
If you want to know what's wrong with politics, take a look at the way it's been operating.
Yeah, there's too many. There's not enough candidates that are focusing on the leadership. The only candidates that are going in there that are focusing on personal gain.
Look, there's nothing wrong with the council from Ward 4. He's a very decent guy, and 6 and 7, okay? But they should not be unopposed. We don't get good leadership. And by the way, I want to go backtrack a bit. The paper of record is complicit in much that's happening because where were they with their editorials when unaccompanied minors were hitting the city of Lynn like they were? Where were they pushing their state reps and others to do their job?
They were completely silent on it.
Exactly.
And it was either that they didn't know, didn't care, or the much more sinister thing is they knew about it but had to keep it quiet.
I'll buy sinister.
Me too.
Wards 1, 2, 3, and 5 are contested, but only 2 has more than 2 candidates, and they are Richard Starbott, and this is in order.
The way it's going to appear on the ballot?
Yeah. Gina O'Toole, Peter Grocke, and Christopher McGrain. Now, as I take a peek, Christopher McGrain is all over the place. I don't know whether that means anything.
Everywhere, yeah, like you were saying earlier.
Let me give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Now, as you and I both know, the editorial done by, or a profile done on Chris McGrain by the item was not necessarily in his favor. Right?
No, they brought up some stuff in his past.
Stuff that had been adjudicated a long time ago. Right.
Still stuff. Yeah, but nobody's contesting that it was false or anything, though.
Right. So. But the point of the matter is, they brought up a negative.
Right. They did. Right.
Now,
like they're very accustomed to doing, especially if they don't like it.
But here's the interesting part. I ran at Chris McGrain's at one of my stops, as I'm in my car with my 2 dogs, trying to win $1 million, right? $10 investment with a coin.
You mean you were paying your taxes?
I was paying my taxes.
A guy who tells me all the time he doesn't like to pay taxes.
I don't.
But he scratches tickets.
Well, I don't mind doing it that way. So, because I got a chance of getting it back again.
All right.
So who knocks on the window? None other than Chris McGrain.
Right.
And he tells me that he got a phone call. This is him telling me now. Got a phone call from somebody at the item asking him if he was going to advertise in their paper.
Right. And that was, and I know full well that the way that works is if you advertise, you get good press. If you don't, you get bad press. Case in point.
But wouldn't they, if that's the case,
is that
why would
extortion?
you open up with bad press and then have the Stones to turn around and say to the guy, oh, by the way, why don't you advertise in our paper?
I'll tell you why. It shows what they're capable of doing. So you've already felt the pain of what they can do. So now you're more interested in doing it. You know what everybody tells me when I gripe about, the bad press that I get?
Yeah.
Don't ever get in a fight with somebody who buys ink by the barrel, they say. Yeah. And that was a Ben Franklin.
And pulp by the carload.
Yeah.
There's a domino effect taking place. And I want to get into that if I could. Now think about this, Paul. If McGee wins, Creighton runs for McGee's seat. Agreed? Which leaves an open representative seat that will be vacant, that will vacate a city council seat, that could lead to an opening on the school committee, and on it goes.
So let's
Wait a minute. Let me finish this up. Now, it's also musical. If Moulton challenges Senator Markey and Danny Kaye, among others. Yeah, Danny Kaye, among others, will vie for the 6th congressional district seat, setting off another chain of musical chairs. Don't you love it?
Right, but and getting back to your points earlier, the worst part about that is that's the only way that there'll be a real contested race in any of these major seats is if it's vacated. That's the only thing that will do it. So in other words, why did then Representative Chip Clancy get the seat vacated by
McManus?
No, Tom McGee, the senior.
Okay.
The reason is McGee was no longer running.
Wait a minute. Clancy defeated McGee Senior.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
No.
Yes, he did.
No, it was McGee Jr.
No, Clancy defeated McGee Senior.
That's not exactly true.
It is.
No.
But we'll check on that.
My understanding is back in '96, McGee had to step down. There was, Kavarian, that whole thing was going on, so he was going to just withdraw. And what happened was, because his son has the same name, he put in the papers, and it looked like he was staying on, but it was actually his son who was running.
Well, I don't find that to be the case, but
all right, whatever.
We'll figure that one out.
But my point is, until the Speaker of the House stepped down, and this was after he had lost the speakership, until he stepped down, nobody ever ran against him. Nobody of any consequence. And then all of a sudden it was McGee Jr. and Chip Clancy who ran for that seat. By the way, that was a time that that Clancy actually won in a one-on-one race. I forgot about that.
I'm not sure. Look, McGee took that seat begrudgingly to remain, even though he had been stripped of the speakership by George Kavarian, my former partner at poker. All right. He was an interesting guy.
But anyway, so to me, the point we're trying to make here is that when you're trying to get more people engaged in civic responsibility and doing this type of stuff, but the system is kind of rigged in a way that the only way that anybody will run for a seat that has a chance of winning, that has the support of the machine, if you will, is when a seat opens up. For example, Bobby Fennell, he beat Tim Fehler when the seat opened up, and then he had it for a run of 18 or 20 years or something like that. And he never had any real opposition the whole time. Steve Walsh, he was a state rep for like 12 years. Nobody ever opposed him, and then when he stepped down, the vacuum fills it. And now that you got Creighton and Cahill in there, Cahill didn't even have an opponent. Creighton had one opponent, but they got behind him. But you know what I'm saying?
Yes, and this is what we have to correct if we want to have a vibrant society. If you want to protect your civil liberties, if you want to protect freedom, if you want to have a well-run country, community, or state, You have to get people to run for office.
Right.
I'm not so sure, going right back to the beginning of our show, whether I'm a believer in the party system anymore. I'm almost to the point where I think that we should abandon parties and let people run from the population. I mean, did the Romans have parties?
I don't know.
They had patricians and they had plebes, but what can I tell you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the party, I think a party system can be effective and necessary. The problem is what you were talking about before, when the interests of the individuals within the party are more self-serving than they are to provide.
Well, let me get to a guy from
civic
Youngstown,
engagement.
Ohio. I happen to have been a sales manager for Johnson & Johnson in my other incarnation, and Youngstown was my central city. So I lived in that area for a couple of years. It's a blue-collar town where you have to wash your white shirts every day because all the soot from the steel mills gets on everything. And there's a rep there named, I think his first name is Tim, Ryan's his last name. And he is supposedly one of the shining stars, but they're tattooing him because he is going against Elizabeth Warren. He's going against his own Democratic Party, talking about we have to be business friendly.
Yeah.
Now
He's more towards the center, right?
he is what a Democrat used to be when I was a kid, when I was a Democrat.
Yeah, kind of like
and
John
it's
Kennedy.
refreshing, yeah.
Right.
It's refreshing to have someone run. They're going to tattoo him as opposed to Moulton, as opposed to Elizabeth Warren, these names that are being floated around. I mean, this kid is on the right track. When the Democratic Party actually took care of, the blue-collar working environment, and he's from Youngstown. He knows that constituency.
Right.
Do you think that Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama had any idea what it's like to be from inner-city Lynn?
No,
Of course not.
Not even remotely.
Yeah, I mean, they won't even bother going to District 45 or Rossetti's because it's still not
Right.
enough for them. It's not as upscale. So and Bernie Sanders, he was the biggest hypocrite of all. He's a multimillionaire, and can you imagine a socialist, these almost communist, being a multimillionaire? I mean, can you imagine the contradiction there? Now, did you hear, folks? You heard it here. Moulton, Seth Moulton, whatever his name may be, is thinking of running for the Senate against incumbent Markey. Goes to show you about loyalty. How do you think Elizabeth Warren's going to like that one? I mean, why is he going to challenge? He challenged Taney, didn't he?
He did.
So what is it all about? He didn't wait for an open seat. So what's he? He is the opposite of Cincinnati. He is blind ambition.
Right.
All right? Why is he running against Markey? What does he want? What's his ultimate goal?
President.
Of course.
Right.
And they banded his name around a little bit. I mean, if this country is maybe they are foolish enough to vote for someone with his profile.
And I'll tell you, the guy, he's an empty suit.
Empty?
Empty
You talked
suit.
well, he's the perfect puppet.
Right.
He's the puppet on the string. Yeah.
He makes all the noise, and they give him they protect him every way they can, and
I will
he has to do what
I will guarantee you he's going to stand up against Trump on DACA. I will guarantee it. And so won't Tom McGee, if you want to know the truth. Will Judy Kennedy? She might be put in a tough position on that one.
While John Taney was wounded because of the situation involving his wife and gambling and all that kind of stuff, right? So he was wounded and he was vulnerable, right? So that's why he ran. And when he was out there, he was, I'm going to be different. I'm going to support the constituency, all that kind of stuff. And I put it to him during the campaign. I said, if you're going to be our congressman, you have to serve the interests of our community. And he said, oh yeah. Afterwards, every vote that he made was votes that were passed on down to him from Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi. And I called him.
Wait a minute.
And I called him on it. I saw him after the election, and I said, if we wanted somebody who was going to just do what somebody else was telling them to do, we would have kept Taney. Or even better, we wouldn't even need a congressman. We'll just do whatever the leadership says. We'll save the money. We'll put that money back into the community. And he didn't like that.
Well, let me say this to you. He was all kinds of praise for Nancy Pelosi.
when it suited
she was
his
the
needs.
greatest thing in the world. She gave him great positions, everything else. Everything. He loved her until Trump won.
Right.
And then he stuck it to her. I mean, he...
Right, because now he's trying to leap ahead. I mean,
Yeah.
I happen to know somebody who's a state rep, right, and relatively new to the position, you know. So, and there's 160 of them, right? So, from a leadership position and ability to move up, you need to, you know, move up. You move up naturally, right? People leave, positions open up, people start coming in behind you, you have more seniority than them, that's how you move up. And you do the right thing by the leadership, and then you move up a little faster and so forth. This guy is like leapfrogging over everybody. Trying to. Well, he did. In
a sense, yeah.
He never held public office, and now he's a congressman.
Pedro, would you put up Frankly Paul for 1 second? There's something I wanted to mention that was, thanks. Do you see that little thing on the side there, Paul, that it looks like a bunch of rods with an axe in the middle of it?
That's on the back of the dime.
Yeah. You know what that is? I put that purposely. That's the fasci. That's the Roman fasci. In order for Cincinnatus, he had to carry that. That was like what a magistrate carries, you know, like a robe and a gavel.
Right.
You know, this is where folks talk about fascism. I don't know what they're talking about. That's the Roman sign. That's the fasci.
And what is it? What is that for?
It's a bunch of rods tied together, because separately those rods are easy to break.
Right.
But if you bind them together, you have strength.
Right.
And of course, the sword is power and law and order.
Right.
Okay. So everything's misrepresented today. The fascists, you know, fascist Nazism, they're unrelated. But somehow they
got connected at one point during the 30s, is what you're saying, right?
Not really. They've been connected by poorly educated professors who have agendas. Yeah, but they don't.
The agenda is the key. I mean, they're trying to make it look like it's something that they want it to fit their narrative, is what they want.
Of course, that's what it is. But we have to get to our comments, Paul, namely because, and folks, thank you for the comments. And thank you for particularly this one, which, Paul, have you got it?
I do. You want me to read it?
No, you're reading it. Hi, Joe and Paul. Yeah.
All right. So from a viewer about the idea of free tuition. Just watch the latest show and find that it was, as usual, wonderful with many topics and thought-provoking issues. Thank you for saying that. I would like to make one comment about a subject that was brought up, in that being Bernie Sanders making a college education free, which in my opinion is nothing but a Democratic crock of BS. All right, the Democrat Sanders says, by the way, he's an independent, but the Democrat Sanders says college will be tuition free, leading people to believe that going to college will be totally free, which is a 100% lie. Make tuitions free and the schools will increase all of the other fees they charge students and parents. Let's call a spade a spade. People, the Democratic Party is trying to sell you the biggest line of BS about free college.
By the way, Paul, let me correct you. Bernie Sanders ran for the nomination of the Democratic Party.
Right.
He may claim he's an independent, but he ran for the nomination of the Democratic Party.
But he was officially an independent when he did it, right? I mean, did he have to change?
He had a switch.
He had a switch, and then he switched back, right?
I don't know if he switched back.
So,
He's thinking of running
so
for
getting back to what you were saying earlier about
Wait a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
One other comment.
Oh, all right. Go ahead.
Trouble is that the Linway, and this has to do with the seawall, Paul,
Yep.
and I want to talk to this because you can speak to it.
All right.
Trouble, you're very familiar with the seawall, having been one of the driving forces to get it for the city of Lynn.
Yep.
The Linway is a barrier to access to this area. On my health walk to the core city and back, I walked past the park, and I believe he's talking about Heritage State Park.
Yep.
And there is almost no one there, as the parking lot is almost empty, which is true. I don't think many people.
Yeah, I mean, Heritage State Park is, you know, it's been there for a very long time, and it really has never
utilized.
It doesn't get utilized.
Sure.
I mean, there's parking for it. You can go there, but I mean, it needs more, and that's part of the whole waterfront master plan. And as somebody who was on the city council, and I was actually on the waterfront subcommittee when they were developing it, the folks from, I forget the name of the outfit, but the people who helped us draft the waterfront master plan talked about creating lanes. Because what this fellow is talking about is how difficult it is for anybody to really enjoy the Linway, because you have to cross the Linway to get to the other side,
right,
and the boardwalk and all that kind of stuff. But part of the plan is to create like a livable community kind of concept, where there are actually lanes from like the common area, you know, where right over here on the North and South Common, making lanes down those streets that will be walker friendly and bike friendly, so that people can actually get all the way down the street and cross over and end up at like where the ferry is, and then there'll be a boardwalk which heads down to the beach, down to Nahant Beach, and then a boardwalk that heads all the way up to Point of Pines.
Didn't who was the architect that we used to have on the show? Her husband got shot a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, Katerina.
Katerina talked often about that, and she was a fan of the walkways you're talking about.
Yeah.
We got a minute, Paul. We got to remind folks, primary September 12th. Make sure you get out there and vote, regardless, because it positions people, correct?
Right. Yeah, it helps people to understand who the right candidates are, and who's got momentum and that kind of thing.
If there's anything that you'd like us to be discussing on the show, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to do it. Paul, I think it's instructive that we go with Cincinnatus and we go with the Huey Longs, and I hope you people appreciate that, and the various historical figures, so we can put things into context. You really can't understand the present or the future without memory.
Right.
You know? Yeah,
it's important. As a history professor, it's great to get the information that you bring to the forefront, because I think that it is a missing part of the dialogue on a daily basis. Yeah.
And I want to say to the folks out there that you have invited me into your annual Tech Golf Tournament, which is September 30th.
September 30th, yeah. If folks want to participate in the Tech Tournament, they can
sign up.
Go to the Lynn Tech Alumni Association website, and you can sign up, put in a foursome. You can just come for dinner, or you can put in a sign. And the net proceeds go to support the students and the school.
And what happens is that fund offers scholarships or improvements to the school.
Yep,
it's a really good thing.
It really is. Yep. And we are pretty proud of it. We've got a really good crew of people that do a lot of work in this area. We're pretty excited about the good stuff that happens.
We got to wrap it up, folks. So don't forget, September 30th, Lynn Tech.
It's a Saturday, 3 o'clock.
It's a Saturday. And next Tuesday, primary day. Until then, have a great week.